I think the most important kind of first principle is that the debt and deficit are always ideological questions. Like, just to give you an example from the Trump administration, like this is very relevant right now. So the Budget Lab at Yale estimated that the 18,000 IRS employees that Trump fired after Joe Biden hired them all. So Trump fired 18,000 IRS employees. The Budget Lab at Yale estimates that will reduce U.S. tax revenues between 150 billion to 1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. And that's, very wide scale, and it just entirely depends on how much non-compliance there is. How many people assume, okay, yeah, they cleared out the IRS, so we don't have to really worry about getting audited. We can just fudge the numbers. They can't really fight us, that kind of thing. But the point is, 150 billion to 1.5 trillion that they're choosing to forgo, but they're at the same time in their budget, the Republicans are trying to cut 800 billion from Medicaid over the next 10 years. And they're saying, well, we're broke, we can't afford Medicaid. And so the point is just the debt and deficit are always ideological questions. It's not that we can't afford Medicaid, it's that these people don't like Medicaid. They just want to get rid of Medicaid. And I think that's the most important thing, because these discussions always kind of turn into this neoliberal law of nature argument where you just like, oh, we just can't afford it anymore. We just can't do this anymore. We're broke. And it's never the case. It's always a question of priorities, what you're willing to do with the money. In the abstract, yes, I do believe the national debt matters. And I think just looking at history, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, usually what happens is empires get bogged down in expensive military conflicts overseas, run up massive debts, and then slowly disintegrate, or at least have a massive collapse in power and prestige, which we seem to be on that trajectory right now. So but I would also argue people just use kind of like the big scary number, 20 trillion or 30 or whatever it is. I think it's much more relevant to look at a nation's debt to GDP ratio. And what's interesting is the United States sits around 120, 130%. I think it's 120%, 120% debt to GDP ratio. But Japan is more than double us at 260% debt to GDP ratio. And Japan is not a perfect economy, but the point is, I don't believe these national debt questions are as urgent as they're made out to be. Like, you do have to settle this. You shouldn't just run massive deficits for no point. You should try to balance your budget, especially in good economic times. But I think it's like, portrayed as this kind of a much more rapid ticking time bomb than it actually is. There's like people, the trade where people would bet that the yields on Japanese bonds would spike because of the debt. It was nicknamed the Widowmaker trade in finance, because everybody lost money, because ultimately, a stable, well-run society, their bonds, especially when they have debt in their own currency, their bonds are usually a good, safe investment. And just the only other point is, unlike people, nations do not retire. So that's like, people always make the analogy of household finance, but you kind of have to pay down your debts when you retire, but a nation never really does that. So I think some level of debt is probably inevitable and can probably just be rolled over forever. And I don't even think it's a bad thing. I think that Alexander Hamilton was completely right in setting up a national debt for the United States. So I think there will always be at least some level of debt, but you should try to maintain it to a manageable level, and not waste all your money on bailouts and murdering pregnant women in Afghanistan or Gaza or whatever.